G'day, boys and girls. Ross and Jono with you once again, and we're talking about the first Ark of the Covenant, because in recent weeks, Ross, g'day, Ross.
Yep.
We've talked about the cherubim, going pretty well. We've talked about the menorah. We've talked about the Maccabees, of course, the pillaging of such sacred items from the temple, and how many times were they taken, even replaced with cheaper versions or even more elaborate versions. And within that topic, we continue to take a deeper look at the first Ark of the Covenant. But in order to do that, Ross, let's begin with the elaborate treasure that is the one that was made even more famous in recent history by the movie Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Hey, let me just say,
go ahead.
Let me just say, though, that I absolutely love those movies. And,
I love those
some people don't, but I am a
Who
sucker
doesn't?
for
I've never met a person who doesn't like it.
Okay, all right. I thought maybe it was just me. No,
I'm telling you.
All right.
These are great. And, of course, centered around the Ark of the Covenant, right? And this one is the elaborate one that we read about. Not everybody knows that there are two arks that are mentioned in the Pentateuch, and we're going to be talking about. Let's talk about the elaborate one first. We'll work our way back, and we'll get to the original, the first Ark of the Covenant. In order to do that, Ross, I mean, we can talk about Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, and not the Temple of Doom, the Raiders of the Lost Ark, the dangerous item. If you misuse it, if you're not authorized to touch it, then it will melt your face off. And
or if you just touch it, like Uzzah, and you just fall over dead. So I mean, this is. Or wait. If you're from the Philistines and you steal it, you're hit with hemorrhoids, and nobody likes a hemorrhoid. And so these are bad things, right?
It is a dangerous box. It has all sorts of powers. Throughout the Tanakh, in fact, it is either viewed as a communication tool with the divine, or a weapon of war. We could go into that, but that's a totally different subject. What exactly is this elaborate Ark of the Covenant for? There seems to be two schools of thought. But I suggest let's begin with the New Testament of all places. We don't usually do that, but I feel that it is fair that we go to Hebrews chapter 9, because it has a list of bits and pieces within the temple. Can we do that?
We can, and Jonah, I'll just have to say I'm ready for you to do that, because I have the New Oxford Annotated Bible with the Apocrypha. I call this my Noab. It's sort of like Moab, but Noab. The New Oxford Annotated Bible. So we're going to Hebrews chapter 9.
Hebrews chapter 9.
4. Okay.
This is, by the way, while we're talking about these really are the textbooks of our programs, really, aren't they? I mean, there's the Noab that you're talking about. There's this one, the Jewish Study Bible, which we love so much. There is, of course, the this one here, the Synoptic Harmony of we like that. You got to get that if you don't have one of those, by James Newsom Jr. And of course, the one that Josh is reading at the moment, and that is the Moses Scroll.
The Moses Scroll.
These are the textbooks. These are the textbooks of our program. If you don't have those, well, you've got to get them. All right. So you're using that. I'm going to put this here. I'm going to read it. Actually, I think I'm going to read it here from the New King James, and tell me if you have anything significantly different. But it says in Hebrews chapter 9, 3-5, behind the second curtain was a second section called the Most Holy Place, having the golden altar of incense and the Ark of the Covenant, covered on all sides with gold, Ross, and in which, this is the important part, in which was a golden urn holding the manna, Aaron's staff that budded, right, the almond stick, and the tablets of the covenant. Above it were the cherubim of glory. By the way, and we won't get off this onto this topic, but the cherubim of glory, I don't think that's mentioned anywhere else in either the New Testament or the Tanakh. the cherubim of glory, overshadowing the mercy seat. All right. Now, just quickly, Ross, let's deal with each of these things, because apparently all of these are crammed into the Ark of the Covenant, and the Ark of the Covenant is kind of sizable, although the problem is that we have the dimensions, and if I remember correctly, I think the Ark of the Covenant is only 2.5 cubits long. Is that right?
Yeah.
Which kind of makes Aaron kind of short, if that was his staff.
Aaron could be like me, might be the perfect size human. So it doesn't, you don't have to, I mean, first of all, it doesn't say that it's you're thinking that Aaron's
you're only
staff
3 cubits tall.
Has to be a big staff, but it could be like a walking stick, like a cane. It could be, we don't know.
Well, I guess if he's only as tall as you and it is only a walking stick, then maybe it would fit in diagonally.
Don't say it like that. Say if he's the perfect size human like you, then it probably is no problem. But you're going to talk about each of these items because that's what it says is in the box. It's in the box, Jonah. Yeah. So what are we dealing with here?
I just want to talk about the little pot of manna.
Okay.
What was that?
No, go ahead.
Are you getting messages from Siri?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, Seth told me I had to fix that, but I haven't yet. So go ahead.
Setting out. So this is in chapter 16 of Exodus, right? It's really interesting because each of these passages are problematic in and of themselves, right? So just really quickly, I was reading through. I thought I'm just going to remind myself of these stories. These things that are, according to the New Testament, crammed into the Ark. And one of the interesting things that I encountered as I was reading this, and I totally skipped over it every single time I had read this before. But in verse 13, it says, "In the evening appeared a covering in the camp, a covering of quail, Ross."
Yep.
And then it just breezes over that. Oh, and in the morning, there was a fall of dew around the camp. And when they came out and they saw this stuff on the ground, and they said, "What is this?" And this is the manna with which they were fed for 40 years. I mean, personally, I would have opted for some quail. Would have got some of that night and problem solved, because they're all starving in the wilderness.
Yep. Well, let me tell you, that's because, hold on, you would have craved for the flesh of quail, and you would have fallen for the old trick. Remember in the book of Numbers, where they wanted it so badly that
it was coming out their nostrils.
God said, that's right. So there you go. Which do you prefer? Maybe, depending on when this happened. Now, stick with me. I'm going to throw something in the mix. Depending on when this happened, you say, well, maybe they didn't know about what happened in the book of Numbers. But I'm going to show you in a minute that this text that we're talking about now was written way later, Jonah, and I'm going to
way later. So the question really is not when it happened, but in fact, if it happened. But there are problems in the text. Bring those to us just quickly, Ross, because there are one of the other things that stood out to me was it says in here, God says, we're gonna do this experiment and we'll see whether or not they're going to be obedient to my law. And then it talks about one of those laws, doesn't it? But this is there's a problem with that. Just give us the details on that, Ross.
So I think what you're talking about is what we have with Exodus 16 is that this is prior to the arrival at Horeb. So they have not yet received the law, as we say. So how would they know about the law if they have not yet received the law from Horeb? Now, some people would argue, Jonah, based on texts like Genesis chapter 26, that the children of Israel already had everything, because there in 26 is talking to Isaac about Abraham's faithfulness and how he kept the law, the Torah, and so forth. But everyone who reads the biblical account honestly will see that they've not yet even arrived at Sinai or Horeb, so they don't know about the Shabbat. And this whole story is about gather enough during the 6 days, right? Am I right? Is that where it's talking about this?
That's right. And twice as much on the sixth day, and it will magically last for 2 days. Whereas if you just get too much and you want to lay some over for the next day, it's going to stink and be filled with worms and all this sort of stuff and go off. But miraculously, if you gather twice as much on the sixth day, it'll be fine. It will be as if you own a refrigerator, and you won't have any problem.
One other point, Jono, just to round up this anachronistic proof. In other words, that this text is written much later than it is presented as. If you notice down in verse 31, it begins to recapture all of what has been said about the manna. In other words, the children of Israel called it manna. It was like coriander seed, white, tastes like wafers made with honey. This is what God, the Lord, commanded. Let an omer of it be kept throughout your generations. Now, this is, I think, what you referred to when we were in Hebrews 9. In order that you may see the food with which I fed you in the wilderness when I brought you out of the land of Egypt. So this would make the connection with Hebrews 9, that a part of it was saved. And Moses said to, wait.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Moses said to Aaron, take a jar and put an omer of manna in it and place it before Jehovah, or the Lord, to be kept throughout your generations. Now, let me read one more verse. As the Lord commanded Moses, so Aaron placed it before the covenant for safekeeping. They can't place it before the Lord, before the covenant, because the covenant has not been given yet.
They don't have it.
And
they don't have it.
One final, you want me to read the last part of this?
Go ahead, please.
It says, the Israelites ate manna 40 years, Jono, 40 years, until they came to a habitable land. They ate manna until they came to the border of the land of Canaan. An omer, it says, is a tenth of an ephah. One final point. It's telling us before the arrival at Sinai, at Horeb, that they're going to eat it for 40 years, but they're barely reaching the first year of the wilderness journey. So the earliest this could be written is when?
Oh, at least 40 years later, and certainly longer than that, when they're in the land of Canaan. So clearly this was written much later. But in any case, Ross, it says that it is placed before the ark, not in the ark. Much like the, Deuteronomy chapter 31 talks about the scroll of the Torah of Moses, doesn't it? And it says that the Levites were instructed to take that and place it before the ark, not in the ark.
Mitzad, at the side of, and a lot of people, like you said, they translate it inside of, but it's really put it beside the ark.
Now, the other thing that Hebrews lists there is Aaron's staff. So this is a really interesting thing that I encourage everybody to do. Go and do a word search in, say, Bible Gateway or whatever. Put in Aaron and staff and just do that word search, and you'll see it's rather telling, I think, Ross. But because we think of Moses's staff as the staff that parted the Dead Sea, or the staff that was stretched out over the Nile and all of these things, but it's actually Aaron's staff. He uses Aaron's magic stick, as I like to say, and does all these miraculous things with it. And it culminates in Numbers chapter 17, where there's a little bit of a power struggle, if you like, a little bit of a challenge. And the text tells us that God tells them, get all of your magic sticks and put them before the tabernacle. And in fact, they put it inside, I think, and overnight Aaron's buds and actually produces fruit, in this case almonds. So now we know what it's made of. It's a branch of almond. And do you say almond or almond?
I say almond, but I always pronounce. Yeah, I put a little bit of L in there. I like to include
that. Yeah, I put a bit of L in there. A lot of people like to ignore that L. Anyway, so there that is, and apparently that goes into the ark. But does it say that in Numbers chapter 17, Ross?
Well, I don't know. Show me something.
I wonder, what verse is this? I think verse 10. No.
I see what you're going for. Yeah.
Where is it?
Yeah, it's verse 10.
What is the verse I want? Is it?
It's verse 10.
What does it say? Read it to me.
My English says, and the Lord said to Moses, put back the staff of Aaron before the covenant to be kept as a warning to rebels, so that you may make an end of their complaints against me, or else they will die. Is that what you're looking for?
So it's before the ark?
That's what it says. Let me,
That's what it says.
maybe I should look at the Hebrew just to make sure, but I think so.
That's my understanding. So the writer of Hebrews, and we don't know who that is, but he's kind of missing out there. But if we wanted an absolute statement that rules out these things from being inside the ark, we would go to 1 Kings chapter 8, verses 9. Actually, I'm going to start in, if I may, I'm going to start in verse. Let's see here. I'm going to start in verse 7, I think, because this is going to become relevant a little bit later. It says,
"Hey,
for the cherubim
go ahead. I'm sorry. Before you read it, Jono, I'm going to flip to Chronicles while you read that one, and then after you read yours, I'll read mine. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay. All right. Good one. For the cherubim spread their wings over the place of the ark, and the cherubim made covering over the ark and its carrying poles from above. But the poles, remember this, the poles were so long, Ross, that the ends of the poles could be seen from the holy place in front of the inner sanctuary. There's a reason for that, and we'll get to a little bit later, but they could not be seen from the outside. They are there to this day. Verse 9, there was nothing in the ark, Ross, except the 2 tablets of stone which Moses put there at Horeb, where the Lord made a covenant with the sons of Israel when they came out of the land of Egypt. What have you got in Chronicles?
It's basically the exact same thing, Jono, but just so people know, it's 2 Chronicles chapter 5, verses 8 through 10. And I'll just hit the one point that you did. There was nothing in the ark except the 2 tablets that Moses put there at Horeb, where the Lord made a covenant with the people of Israel after they came out of Egypt. But let me add this. There are minimalist scholars who don't believe anything in the Bible. And let me just say that some of the greatest minds, some of the greatest scholars of the Hebrew Bible use these verses that you and I just read to prove that there was an ark with poles that you could see bulging at the curtain. Notice why. Now, how do I say that? Because it says the poles were so long, Jono, that the ends of the poles were seen from the holy place in front of the inner sanctuary. They couldn't be seen from outside, but they are there to this day. Frank Moore Cross and other brilliant-minded scholars said that no one would put this in if it weren't the case. So in other words, when this was written, the ark was still there in the temple. So whereas a lot of scholars would say that this text in Chronicles and even the text in Kings was edited late, and minimalist scholars go later and later, these guys, Albright, Frank Moore Cross, they said, no. This says that this text, when this text was written, the ark was still in the temple, just for what it's worth. All right? I just wanted to throw that in.
No, that's good. And we're going to talk about the poles in a little more detail later on, but this does pertain to the elaborate ark. So we're not yet at the first Ark of the Covenant. Let's talk about that elaborate ark and what we know of it or what is spoken. And we get the majority of this from Exodus, and I think we start in Exodus 25. Does that make sense?
Yep, that's right.
All right. This is what it says, and this is from I'm going to read from verse 10 to 22, I think.
Okay.
Just a little bit. Right. Now they shall construct an ark of acacia wood, 2.5 cubits long, 1.5 cubits wide, and 1.5 cubits high. You shall overlay it with pure gold inside and out, and you shall overlay it. You shall make a gold molding around it. You shall also cast 4 gold rings for it and fasten them on its 4 feet. 2 rings shall be made on one side of it and 2 rings on the other side of it. You shall make poles of acacia wood and overlay them with gold. You shall put the poles into the rings on the side of the ark to keep the ark to carry the ark with them. The poles, Ross, shall remain in the rings of the ark. They shall not be removed from it. You shall put the ark of the testimony. You shall put, So the point there, by the way, is that once you put the poles in, that's where they live. The poles live there. You shall not take them out. They will not be removed. This is why you could see them bulging at the curtain, as you well pointed out. Verse 17: you shall make an atoning cover of pure gold, and then it talks about the cherubim and all of this, and it's really quite elaborate. An atoning cover on top of the ark. Is there anything in this section that you want to highlight, Ross?
Well, I tell you, you're right to go into this elaborate description. This is where we learn that it is to be made and what it's to look like and so forth. And all I'll say is that a very similar account is from chapter 37, verses 1 through 9 of Exodus, and that's just where it describes the making of what is described to be made here. So people who follow the weekly Torah portions know that you have, I think it's Terumah and Tetzaveh, where one describes the making, and then sometime shortly thereafter you read the one that sounds almost identical.
Right. Now, let me ask you a question about that. This is described, we're to understand from the book of Exodus, this is described to Moses to make this ark. Once he has already received the tablets upon Mount, in Exodus, I guess it's Mount Sinai, not Horeb, but he comes down, and then God says, now I want you to make all of these things, now, set about, and there are specific people to make them. We're about to read about that in chapter 31, but this is all post getting even the second set after he smashes the first two, coming down and seeing the idolatry of the golden calf and so on and so forth. That's the way you understand it? Okay.
Yeah, that's the way it seems, yeah.
Grand. Chapter 31. Now the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, see, I have called by name Bezalel, the son of Uri and the son of Hur, there you go, tribe of Judah, and I have filled him with the Spirit of God in wisdom and in understanding, in knowledge and all kinds of craftsmanship, to create artistic designs for work in gold and silver and bronze, and in cutting the stones for the settings and in carving of wood. This guy, he was an all-rounder, jack of all trades. A Bezalel of all trades. And behold, I myself have appointed him with Aholiab, the son of, what's this guy's name?
Aholiab.
Ahisamach, son of
Ahisamach. Yeah.
Of the tribe of Dan. And in the hearts of all who are skilled, who are skillful, I have put skill, so that they may make everything that I have commanded you, the tent of meeting, the ark of the testimony, the atoning cover.
Let me say one thing.
And the furniture.
One thing that's interesting is that when it talks about filled with the Spirit, it's interesting that it says there are three words that are tied to that. Did you notice that?
Go ahead.
It says Chokhmah, Binah, and Da'at. Oh, hold on just a second. Hit a button or something, and now I think I had to restart the stage. Check and see. Start event.
Yeah, I was bounced out of Discord, but I've just come back and everyone seems like they're there. And I've just got to be invited back to speak on Discord. And there it is. And there we are. Beautiful. Hey, everyone. We're back on. You good? I can't hear Ross now. Why is that? Why can I not hear Ross?
Try that.
Now I can hear you. Okay. So where we were up to,
I'm sorry. So picking up where I left off before just a moment ago, that when he mentions the Spirit of God in this, and you said that Bezalel is filled with the divine Spirit. And it says, the English in my translation says ability, intelligence, and knowledge. In Hebrew, the three words are chokhmah, wisdom, binah, understanding, and da'at is knowledge. And the thing that I find interesting, particularly among the priestly writers, like we see in Exodus, is that this description of the Spirit of God, these are what I call, bear with me, the roots of the Spirit. Christians talk about the fruits of the Spirit. I mean, we've heard that in Christianity, but these are the roots of the Spirit. So we find this over and over and over. So that's just a freebie. You get that for free, Jono.
Hey, now, speaking of this, Ross, what I found interesting when I was reading through this, because this is echoed again in Exodus chapter 35, and it seems to be saying, without exception, Bezalel is filled with the Spirit of God in wisdom and understanding and knowledge and craftsmanship, but not Aholiab. Did you notice that?
Yeah, he's like an assistant.
He's like an assistant. He doesn't get the Spirit of God.
No, it's like you and I when we work together. You're just
you're filled with the
be
Spirit
Aholiab, I'll be Bezalel.
Okay, there you go. So he's like an apprentice, not filled with the Spirit, but has skill, nevertheless, as God has given him skill to do some fancy things. They are both, however, described as having the ability to teach. So I guess they have under them a bunch of apprentices.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Maybe so.
There
Maybe
you go.
so.
Maybe so. And then now you mentioned Exodus chapter 37. It goes into a little bit more detail, and it says, now Bezalel made the ark of acacia wood, and he did all the things that he was told he was supposed to do. He actually executed this project and knocked it all together. Yep. Good for him. Now, before we go any further, unless you want to highlight anything in those verses,
I want to touch. If I can jump in, you mentioned at the outset of the show that there were different reasons for the ark, and I wanted to touch on a couple of those, if you're okay with that. Like,
please.
So some of the things the first thing I want to do is, since we were in Numbers a minute ago, go look at the book of Numbers, chapter 7, in verse 89. Now, some of them heard this earlier, some of them didn't. So I just wanted to touch on, you mentioned that there were a couple of things that the ark was for. One was associated with a sort of a throne for God that would be carried forth, and the enemies would recognize this as the throne of the God of the Hebrew people. The other thing that, and it's similar, it's related to this idea of a throne, and that is in Numbers chapter 7 and verse 89. And just in case I need to read that just to make sure it goes on the video. So it says in Numbers 7:89, long chapter, as we said a moment ago, when Moses went into the tent of meeting to speak with the Lord, he would hear the voice speaking to him from above the mercy seat, as the translation says, that was on the Ark of the Covenant, from between the two cherubim, thus it spoke to him. So that is a very interesting passage in my view. That's one of the things that this ark is for. It represents a communication device from the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, if you will, to the spokesperson, which is Moses, and then thus accordingly to the people. Now, one thing that I want to point out, we've talked in many different things that we've done, many different studies. If you read the priestly material, primarily if you read Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers, Jono, you're going to see this box, ark, by the way, the Hebrew word is aron. Aron means a box or a chest. We translate it ark, but that's just a made-up parochial word. It just means a box, a chest. But it's called in the priestly literature the chest of the testimony, the adut in Hebrew. And over and over and over, dozens of times in the Hebrew Bible, it's called the Ark of or for the testimony. Very interesting study. But you know what? The book of Deuteronomy never calls it the Ark of the Testimony. It only refers to it, to this box. It does refer to it as an aron, a box, a chest, but it never says testimony. It always says covenant. This is the covenant box. This is the covenant chest. If I ever do a translation, I'm going to call it the covenant chest, not the ark of the anything. It's the covenant chest.
Yep.
So I just
No, I
wanted
like
to
that.
draw that out. Very important to understand that it's called something different. Deuteronomy's different, Jonah. It's different on
Deuteronomy is different, and we're about to get into that, Ross. But before we go to Deuteronomy, whilst we're still in Numbers, let's just flick back a couple of chapters because I just want to highlight this before we move on, and that is Numbers chapter 4, because we did highlight a couple of times the poles, and I was just talking to the people about the poles in Tutankhamun's chest, for example. And the poles that go in, and once they're in, they stay there. They're a permanent fixture. And we highlighted the fact that in 1 Kings chapter 8, verse 7 and 8, it says, oh, yeah, the poles were protruding into the curtain. You could see that, and so on and so forth. Now we get to Numbers chapter 4, verses 5 and 6, and it says, Ross, at the breaking of camp, actually 5 and 6, yeah, Aaron and his sons shall go, verse 5.
Okay.
Aaron and his sons shall go in and take down the screening curtain and cover the ark of the pact with it. They shall lay a covering of dolphin skin, I've got here. Yep. I'm pretty sure that didn't happen. Leather of some description over it, and spread a cloth of pure blue on top, and they shall put its poles in place. So the poles aren't in Numbers chapter 4. They have to be put in. And this is a source of confusion for some, but it's just an example of where one text doesn't agree with another. One text suggests that it's very important that they should go in and stay in. This text says, we put it in place, we take the poles out, and then when we're ready to move it, then we'll put the poles in. And it goes on. All right. Now, moving on, you mentioned Deuteronomy, and I think this is where we are. In fact, before we
do that.
You got something else?
Before we do that, can we talk about the Moses scroll?
Yeah, I was just about to say, maybe we should kick off with the Moses scroll first, and I think that's probably the best way to do it. Would you like to do that?
Yeah, let me just say a bit on this, and we'll discuss it. The Hebrew Bible, so far from what we've covered, Exodus chapter 37 very clearly, says that a certain artisan, a spirit-filled artisan, produced the Ark of the Covenant with his apprentice or his co-worker, so Bezalel and Aholiab. Very clear description. You read the description. It's very clear what it looked like, who made it, obvious as all get out, right? But whenever I wrote the book on the Moses scroll, and one of the things that I excitedly discovered is that it doesn't say that Bezalel or Aholiab made the ark. In fact, neither of these guys are mentioned in the Moses scroll, but instead someone else, we read, made the ark of, let's just say the chest of the covenant, right? So I'm going to read from the Moses scroll, Jonah, and it's we are in strip G, we call it fragment G, and this is column B, and I'm going to pick up roughly at verse 2, line 2, and I interceded, this is Moses, first person, I interceded on your account at that time 40 days and 40 nights, and at Taberah, and at Massah, and at Kivrot HaTa'avah, you were rebellious against your Elohim, Jonah. At that time, Elohim said to me, carve 2 stone tablets for yourself, like the first ones, and ascend the mount to me. And then he says, Moses, first person, I ascended the mount, and the 2 tablets were in my hands. And Elohim wrote on the tablets the 10 words which he spoke to you in the mount on the day of assembly, and he gave them to me, and behold them, they are in the chest that I made. Now,
behold them, they are in the chest that I made. Right, go ahead.
Yeah, so this is very interesting, and one thing that people ought to pay attention to is that this is something clearly different than what we read in the book of Exodus. So some people would say, Well, maybe Moses here doesn't mean that he made it, but he means he ordered it to be made. That maybe, but that's not what this is saying.
Hmm.
Very clearly, Moses says he made a box to put them in. Now,
Hmm.
what we want to do now is say that it's not, because some people might say, I don't know what a Moses scroll is. It's not in my Bible. And they might disagree with that reading.
Kind of
But
is. Kind of is in your Bible, though.
it
But
kind of
keep going. Yep.
is. Yeah.
Hmm.
So I was just going to say, where else do we see this story and where
Right.
is it in the Pentateuch?
So this story is represented, as is most of the Moses Scroll, is represented in Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy derives from the Moses Scroll, and it elaborates a little bit. And then, of course, we know that Deuteronomy contains chapters 12 to 26, I think, is it, the
Yep.
law code, which is not part of the Moses Scroll. But there is elaboration, and that elaboration is interesting. It says in Deuteronomy chapter 10, verses 1 to 5, at that time, the Lord said to me, and this is Moses, cut
First
out
person.
for first person, 2 tablets of stone, like the first 2, come up to me on the mountain and make an ark of wood. Now, that's interesting, Ross, because in the Moses Scroll, it doesn't tell us what it's made of.
Yep.
It could be like a sarcophagus of sorts. It could be made of stone for all we know. But here it says, make an ark of wood for yourself. Then, now, by the way, he's being told to do this before he comes up and receives
right.
the second set, because the first set he came down and he shattered them upon the golden calf incident. And he says, make another one, come up to me, and then I will write on the tablets the words that were on the first tablets, which you smashed to pieces, and you shall put them in the ark. So I, first person, Moses, made an ark of acacia wood and cut out 2 tablets of stone like the first 2, and I went up on the mountain with the 2 tablets in my hand. Now, I've got. Have you got hands or hand? Because I think I do think in the Moses Scroll, Ross. We'll come back to this, but I do think it is hand. Then he wrote on the tablets, like the first writing, the 10 commandments which the Lord had spoken to you on the mountain from the midst of the fire on the day of the assembly, and the Lord gave them to me. Then, verse 5, I turned and I came down from the mountain, and I put the tablets in the ark which I had made. I put them there in the ark which I had made, and they are there, just as the Lord commanded me, Ross.
Yeah. Now, I heard what you said about, we'll come back to that, but let me point out one other thing as we build on this text here. This text is clearly edited. Now, how do I know that? Notice verse 1 through 5, which you just read, is in the first person. Now, watch what happens when you get to verse 6. The Israelites journeyed from Be'erot Bene Yakan to Moserah. Aaron died there, and there he was buried. Now, let me just stop there. This disagrees with everything else in the Hebrew Bible. Aaron does not die at Moserah. Only here in Deuteronomy chapter 10 does he die there. Where does Aaron die and he's buried? He doesn't die here. Where is it? You remember? He dies on Mount Hor.
Mount Hor. We have Mount Hor, and or unless you're visiting Petra, then there's also a burial place of Aaron there, which we're yet to venture to. It's
well, they claim though that that's Mount Hor, because according to the Bible, everywhere else it says he died at Mount Hor, but this is different. But let me keep going. His son Eleazar succeeded him as priest. From there, they journeyed to Gudgodah. From Gudgodah to Jotbatah, land flowing with flowing streams. And at that time, the Lord set apart the tribe of Levi to carry the ark of the covenant of the Lord, to stand before the Lord to minister him, and to bless in his name to this day. Therefore, Levi has no allotment or inheritance with his kindred. The Lord is his inheritance, as the Lord your God promised him. One more verse. I stayed on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights as I'd done the first time. It switches back to first person. So let me make my quick point here. This story from Deuteronomy 10 seems to be based on an earlier source, but it's been mixed in with other traditions. So Deuteronomy 10, verse 1 through 5. Now, I'm going to read verse 5, and then we're going to go down to verse 10. Watch this. So I turned and came down from the mountain and put the tablets in the ark that I had made, and there they are as the Lord commanded me. Then in verse 10 it says, first person, I stayed on the mount 40 days and 40 nights as I'd done the first time, and once again the Lord listened to me. But what happens is there's a priestly tradition, verse 6 through 9, that comes from we don't know where. It gives a different reason for the setting apart of Levi than we find elsewhere. It gives a different location for Aaron's death and burial. And it's just a very interesting insertion there, don't you think?
It is fascinating. And every time that there is an insertion, that is to say that something that is not derived from the Moses scroll, these are the problems that, or the obvious aspects of the text that arise. So once again, these verses that you're referring to are not derived from the Moses scroll. This happens quite a lot. As I mentioned, Deuteronomy is the elaborate, like we have the elaborated ark, the elaborate ark. This is the elaborate version. Deuteronomy is the elaborate version of the Moses scroll, if you like. There's additions, added information in the text, whether that's true or not. This is the case. So where are we now? Just concerning hand. Yeah.
No, I was going to say one more point just to mention when we talk about Deuteronomy being an elaborated upon, you could say embellished maybe. We know that there are other hands other than Moses here, and we've got classes we've taught on this. But just quickly, if people begin in Deuteronomy and you read Deuteronomy 1 through 5, clearly the author there is someone other than Moses writing at a time other than the time of Moses. He says, he's on the other side of the Jordan. These are the words which Moses spoke on the other side of the Jordan. So whoever's writing that is on the Canaan side, referring to Transjordan, where these events took place. So not that we're not making fun. I think people that know us know that. We're simply highlighting that there are embellishments in this text that we love and study. And what we're trying to do is get back to the original. So we believe that there was a chest. We believe that there was a box that was made to hold the two tablets. And so that became later, and I do believe that someone much later did build a very elaborate box. And I think that it was probably coated in gold, and it probably had angelic
cherubim on top.
Yeah, because listen,
and the poles.
When the people from Tyre, when they built the temple, one thing you couldn't slow them down on is the making of angels with big wings. They love these things. I can imagine Hiram of Tyre telling Solomon, "Listen here, Solly, I want to tell you something. You want to see some beautiful. I know you love making these idolatrous temples for all your lady friends from all over the world that don't worship your daddy's God. Look, you want some big angels." We're going to make you some. We're going to put them in everything. It's going to be a motif. And then we're going to make these two big ones, and they're going to have their could it be?
Put them embroidered on the curtains and on the shields and so on and so forth.
Yeah. Could it be that at that time, what once was a small box that Moses made was placed into a much larger, more beautiful box that was built in the same style as we see everything else in the temple? Could it be?
You got to keep up with the times, Ross. Oh yeah, you got to keep it fresh. You got to keep the kids coming back.
That's right.
So you have to make it bigger and better. And so on that, by the way, just to refresh before we get on to what the original box may have looked like without all of the elaborate bits and pieces, just to remind everyone, here in Deuteronomy, here in the Moses scroll, Moses is told, make a box to put this in. I don't want you smashing it like the other ones, all right? This is important, okay? Come up and get a second set. I'll write on it and put it in a box, all right? And he does that, and he puts it in the box. Whereas in Exodus, he's told when he comes down, now I want you to make this box. It's going to be big. It's going to be beautiful. It's going to be heavy. So you need poles and you're going to have 4 Levites to carry it and all this sort of stuff. So was it that big? I wonder about that because in the Moses scroll and in Deuteronomy, it uses BID, right? In my hand. I'm not so sure we're right in saying in my hands. If he can carry 2 tablets in his hand, how big were they actually?
Yeah.
They may not have been very big. And if they weren't very big, if you could carry them both in one hand, then the box, obviously, why not a wooden box? Wouldn't have been very big.
What if the tablet, I've often said this, what if the tablet looks a little bit like this? You know, this is a tablet, something like this, and look, you can write on it with your finger. Remember, in the Hebrew Bible, in Exodus 31:18, there are a couple of other passages where the words are written with the finger and so forth, or maybe they were like this, you know. Now we
like
tend
an
to
iPad
think,
or like a phone size.
yeah,
Sure.
I mean, but I know a lot of people would say, "Oh, that's crazy. It couldn't have been, you know, an iPhone or an iPad." But maybe we tend to think that the God of all creation authored 10 words and put them on like God has to make
Every time they're
stone.
depicted, they're these massive, like when we think of the movie 10 Commandments, he's holding
Charlton
these 2 big grave, these tombstones, right?
Yeah.
And therefore, it necessitates, Ross, it necessitates a large, strong ark that is capable of carrying 2 large, heavy tombstones inside of it, on which the 10 words are written. But here, in the Moses scroll and in Deuteronomy, it talks about in my hand, BID. So, curious, and talking about things that are added to the text, in Deuteronomy chapter 9, verse 17, it makes mention of 2 hands. It puts in the word 2.
Right.
And he says, I threw them from, it might mean I threw them from both my hands, or I threw them from my 2 hands.
Yeah, like
maybe.
Yeah.
But in the Moses scroll, 2 is not there. And I'm just saying it really could be that they were just small.
Let me add to that. Let me add to that.
Ahead.
You're bringing up a great point. In fact, in our pointed text, we can distinguish between plural and singular. In fact, in the Hebrew Bible, based on the Masoretic pointing, we have texts which say that it was from in my hand, and we have texts which say that he had them in both his hands. So, but how do we know that? Only because of the pointing that the Masoretes assigned to the consonants that make up the word hand. Now, in the same thing goes for the Hebrew of the Moses scroll. We don't have vowel points there. So you just have to make a determination when you're doing this. But I agree with you that we have, because of artists, we have decided how big the tablets are, but we don't get how big they are. We have decided what they're made out of, stone, but that's the only thing that we don't see a size. I mean,
we don't know how big the stone was. I mean, we know from the Moses scroll, how much text would have been, and it well could have been that the full 10 words were on both copies, perhaps. That's a possibility as well. We can speculate on all that sort of stuff. But the point is that the original Ark, Ross, seems like a much humbler container, if I can put it that way. Can I say that?
Yeah. And I tell you, last week when we discussed the things that have come up missing, and the many times of the plunderings and so forth, you brought up the text from Second Maccabees, where the Ark, according to this story, was taken out of the land of Israel and brought, or the land of Judah, and brought over into Transjordan, what we call now Transjordan, into the land of Moab, to Mount Nebo, or in that region. And it would be much easier if the ark that was actually taken out was this very small box, that contained the stone tablets. Now, this would have been, if we think about it, let's say, now I know that different people have different dates for the Exodus, but you might be kind of a late date, like a 1200. Some might be a 1500 BC. But either way, if you push that forward until the end of the biblical period when the Babylonians come in and destroy it, you're talking roughly 1,000 years. Can wood survive 1,000 years? Absolutely. Look, in a cave. Just recently, Jonah, we did a story on the swords that were discovered, and there are material evidences that certainly have lasted that long. And if the stone tablets are still there, even if the box rotted away, who knows, man? Maybe. But
maybe. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, but I was just going to say, and you might want to tell us the last mention of the ark. Before we read it, I want to read a paragraph from Richard Friedman, and then maybe we can share with them the last biblical mention of the ark, and then maybe open it up for a few comments. But
I like this. Yeah, go ahead. I'd like to hear that quote.
Can I do Richard Elliott Friedman first?
Please.
Is that okay?
Yeah. Yeah, it's good.
So Richard Elliott Friedman writes this. For some reason, the biblical sources do not tell what happened to the ark containing the tablets of the Ten Commandments. Archaeology, too, has shed no light on this at all. The disappearance of the ark is the first great mystery of this period, and it remains one of the great mysteries of the Bible. There's no report that the ark was carried away or destroyed or hidden. There's not even any comments such as, quote, and then the ark disappeared and we do not know what happened to it, end quote. Or, quote, and no one knows where it is to this day, end quote. The most important object in the world, Jono, in the biblical view, simply ceases to be in the story. So the question is, it just disappears. We know that at the great Passover of 622 BCE, Josiah tells the Levites, go put it in the temple. You don't have to carry it on your shoulders anymore, which brings up all kinds of questions. Hey, wait a minute. I thought it was already in the temple. It was supposedly brought there when Solomon built the temple, and he says he put it there. So why is it out? And then it has to be put back. And then when the temple is destroyed by the Babylonians in 1 Kings 25, or 2 Kings 25 and Jeremiah 52, it's not mentioned among the things plundered. So where is it? And what did Jeremiah have to say about that?
Right. So I'm glad you bring that up. So you mentioned, once again, Maccabees chapter 2, 2 Maccabees chapter 2. And this is verse 6, I think, verse 7, actually. When Jeremiah learned that there were people, trying to follow him and see which cave he put these sacred items in, he rebuked them and he said the place will remain unknown until God gathers his people together and shows his mercy again. Well, that's certainly happened. We can say that point in history that Israel has been regathered to the land, but we don't have the ark. What we do have from that side within a cave is the Moses scroll. We know we have that much. Does that mean that we're not going to find anything else? We may, but it does take us to Jeremiah chapter 3, verse 16. And my understanding, Ross, is that this is the only place in the book of Jeremiah where it mentions the word ark, the Aron. So what does it say in 3:16?
Well, let me flip to that. Jeremiah chapter 3 and verse 16 says the following. And when you have multiplied and increased in the land in those days, says the Lord, they shall no longer say, the ark of the covenant of the Lord. It shall not come to mind or be remembered or missed, nor shall another one be made. Now, the interesting thing about this prophecy, Jono, is that this is the only prophecy in Jeremiah which clearly says it's in the days of Josiah, which is, if you look at Jeremiah chapter 3, verse 6. Now, remember, the last time the ark is mentioned is in the days of Josiah. So it could be, now Jewish legend says that that either, there are two legends that are real prominent, that Jeremiah hid the ark. Another one is that Josiah hid the ark. But here's what we know. Sometime between 622 BCE, because in 2 Chronicles 35, that's where Josiah tells the Levites, go put the ark in the temple. You carried it on your shoulders long enough. Between that, 622, and 586, where it's not mentioned, when it's destroyed and things are mentioned as being carried away, it's not mentioned there. So it has to disappear sometime in that window, right?
It appears
The question is, Jono, which one was it? Was it the big box? Or was it the box that Moses made?
That's a really good question, Ross. I don't even know where to begin. What's your thoughts?
I tell you, I love this idea of the Ark of Moses, mainly because it throws people for a loop. I first learned about it. I mean, James did a talk on this years ago, or he wrote a paper. It's still up on his website, probably, called "The Other Ark of the Covenant." Because people read over this quite a bit, they think, or maybe they read it and even they see the words saying that Moses made the ark, but they certainly aren't looking for discrepant text between Exodus 25:37 and Deuteronomy 10. But when you carefully look at these texts, you have to wonder. I think that a very plausible solution is that Moses really did make the ark, that he made a box, and in that box were the two tablets of the testimony, as the priestly writer would call it, or of the covenant, as the Moses scroll in Deuteronomy call it. And these two tablets, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say maybe it is fair to conclude then that if this was if the tablets are much smaller than we generally imagine them to be, and that the box itself is therefore smaller, perhaps the box of Moses was placed within this elaborate box.
That's right.
Ross,
That's
perhaps.
right.
And why not? I guess that would make sense. Which one did Jeremiah take? I guess if he's sneaking out, he's going to take the smaller box. I don't know. I really don't know. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I would think so. I would really think that that's the case. And of course, it's speculation. And again, no one. I know that there are stories that Ron Wyatt has seen the ark, and and that some rabbi. I've read the stories where some rabbi supposedly looked in a tunnel and saw the ark, and all these stories. But let me tell you,
wacky stories,
no one has seen the ark. No one has seen the ark since, according to the biblical text, since Josiah told the priest, the Levites, to put it up in the temple. And strangely enough, in that time, Jeremiah makes a statement that is puzzling. And that is that no one's going to ask for another one. No one's going to make another one. It's not going to come to mind. It's not going to be missed. It makes you wonder, is he saying that because he knows that he's going to, maybe God tells him, get it out, take that and the scroll that was discovered. Remember, in that same time frame, 622 BCE, Hilkiah the high priest discovers the scroll that Moses wrote. I believe that it was a copy of an ancient scroll, and I think people can read about that in the Moses scroll. It's so interesting to me that his dad is named Hilkiah, and the high priest who discovered the scroll is Hilkiah. So maybe when Jeremiah says in 8:8, who are we to say that we're wise? The lying pen of the scribes is made, and the Torah of the Lord is with us when the lying pen of the scribes has made it a lie. Maybe it's because he's seen the real one and he knows what the other one says. And I don't know.
And I'll tell you something, I actually did give this some thought, and maybe we'll close with this. What would be the point in finding the stone tablets, they would absolutely be scrutinized, Ross, and scholars would be saying, well, how do we know that this is actually it? And if we know that this is ancient, then how exactly did they inscribe this? Because they wouldn't be far be it from the scholars to say, well, this is the finger of God. And my point being, if the Moses scroll is what it claims to be, then we have the contents of those tablets. We have them already. Why do we need what would it achieve by finding the original tablets? Mind you, I think it'd be really cool. I'd love to find them, but I'm just saying. So there it is. I think we're close to.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, let's close in a moment. One thing I wanted to add is that I would speculate one thing, just in case we do find it, because we're gonna do some adventurous things. You and the Tylers and I have been on some fun expeditions, climbing in and out of caves in Jordan. Let me just say this: if you were to find the 10 words, the original stone tablets, I'm going to say with a fair degree of certainty that you would find the words separating dots. You would find them written in this paleo script, and then every word would be divided by an interpunct or word separating dot. Because we know, for instance, that was the practice in antiquity, at least to the early Iron Age, and I think probably into the Bronze Age. You know, you have some, of course, the Moabite stela, the Mesha stela, Moabite stone. It has these word separating dots. The Siloam inscription. And interestingly enough, in the Moses scroll, in the Moses scroll, in the writing, only in the writing of the 10 words are these word separating dots employed. As you would expect, on something that's written in stone. It's as if whoever put this scroll together is looking at the stones and recording what they say. How's that for an ending?
There it is. I like that very much. And with that, we are going to go over to Discord and chat with the members block. And if you want to be part of that, all you need to do is become a member. How can you do that, Ross?
I'll tell you what, there are a lot of ways that they can do that. Of course, our group here that we have here in our studio audience already figured it out. Someone can easily go to our YouTube channel and they can pick one of 3 tiers. They join, they click join, they look at the benefits and so forth, and then they select one, they're in. Another way to do it is to go to our Patreon page. They can go to the Patreon, they can pick any tier, Jono, any tier. Whatever that fits their budget, they click it, they're in. And then one other easy way to do it that we just set up this week, I always say we, I mean Seth. Seth did all the work. But we have in the Discord, in Horeb, a person can go and pick any tier there. So whatever fits. And they're in. Right. And then they can join us on Wednesday night. That's right.
And we're going to go and chat with them now. But before we go, Ross, Saturday, what's happening this Shabbat?
All right, this coming Saturday, we are following along in the cycle of Pentateuch readings. And so what people will find is that as you join us, you're going to join us right in the middle of the Joseph saga. So last week we did Miketz, and we are working our way through the Joseph cycle. So it's going to be really exciting because it's the part of the story where, remember, Joseph is testing his brothers, and the brothers are, they're actually coming back, and we're going to see an interaction between Joseph and his brothers, and I think it's going to be quite exciting. So one of the things I'm going to bring up, and I know what I'm going to bring up because this is a class I taught, it's that one thing interesting about this is that you have, not only do you have the brothers, Joseph, his brothers don't recognize him. He has one thing that's really on his mind and on his heart. And the brothers have one thing on their mind and their heart, and it's the same thing. So we're going to get into that this coming Saturday.
All right, there's that. And before we go, I have to mention that, of course, at the end of April, there is the 81st United Israel Conference, which is happening this year in Louisiana, St. Francisville, in your neck of the woods there. And I am very privileged to be part of that. Thanks to Dave. There's Dave. He's here.
That's right.
In the members block. We're going to be chatting with him in just a moment. And so I'm looking forward to that and giving a presentation as I did a couple of years ago. So I would love to see you guys. I would love to see people who are viewers and people who are members. It is limited in seating. There's only so many people that we can fit inside the building. So let us know that you're coming. It's free to register, and you just need to organize your accommodation. We can help you do that. But just let us know that you're coming. All right.
That's right.
There it is. We're heading on over now. We will be back this time next week.
That's right.